For the basic compositing tricks, I want to talk about two things. One of the reasons why I really like using Blender's Compositor as I'm working and as I'm doing some look development as well, and how that pertains to file management, for example. So I have my scene here, I have a rendered frame. I haven't done anything yet to it in the compositor, but what I've done on this project, and if you look at the files, some people might notice, is generally if you're working on a CG project, you'll render out your frames to a separate file sequence, then you'll bring them into the compositor right after, and then you'll render out a second set of frames with your composited final result and bring it into your editing software. Now what I like about Blender is that when you render something, and I've just literally hit the render button and set up the compositor here, and if you hit the view, use nodes and backdrop and make sure there's a viewer node up here, then you can see this in your node setup. Now I'm going to try and make this as clear as possible and make these nodes as large as possible. You can see what I'm doing. But basically, what I like doing is once I've rendered, composite everything out, and then when I render the image, it's actually the final image that has already been composited. Now, this has some advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage is I only have to deal with one file sequence, so I can immediately get a result out of Blender that I can use for editing, whether it's Blender that I'm using for editing or an external application. I have my final result ready to go once my 3D renders have rendered overnight or whatever, and I can start working immediately. Now the disadvantage of this is if you have something where you have some colors that need to change or something that could be easily fixed in compositing afterwards, because you don't have that second step, you actually have to re-render the entire 3D render with your composite on top. So it's something to consider when you're working, and let's say if you know you have very iffy clients and they keep coming back and they keep sort of wanting to change little things that you can change in compositing, then maybe it's best to do this into two steps. Now, what I'm about to show here works regardless. I just want to give that little bit of information with you. I like doing it that way because then once in my editing program, I can do some very final minor color adjustments and I'm good to go. And I don't have two sets of file sequences for each shot that I have to manage that take up a lot of space on your hard drive as well. Now, that being said, let's get into some of the basic compositing tricks that I like to use. And the first one we're going to have a look at is the glare filter. Now, the glare filter is quite nice. If you want to have some nice glows and things in your image, then you can use this one and it'll get you exactly what you need. Now, I like this fog glow setting in here because it adds just a glow. And as you can still see, there's still not really a lot happening. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit to my image here. And the thing is, one of the things you need to do is play with the threshold over here. So if I go lower, you'll see some of this stuff lights up. Now I hope this is viewable, easily viewable on the recording, but if I bring the threshold down to 0, you'll see the entire image will light up. And this is a very extreme example. I wouldn't go this far. I would just use it to light up some of the highlights in my image. So I bring this down to 0.05. And if you hit the M key, you can mute these nodes, and you can see this brightens up the image and adds a little bit of glow onto the stuff that's either reflecting, refracting, or emitting light. And it just looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to turn this off, turn this back on, and obviously this threshold will be different for every scene that you do. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is how you can use blurs to your advantage. So let's say I'm just going to turn this glare off for a second. I want to grab some of these highlights and I want to blur them out and create sort of my own custom glow / blur. So I'm going to bring in a blur filter. And remember, this glare is turned off. It's now void. So just looking at the raw rendered image again. I'm going to set this to fast Gaussian because obviously this tends to be a little bit faster because it is called fast Gaussian. I like using it, and I like turning on this relative switch as well because now your blur size will actually be relative to the size of your canvas, which means if you're using this and you're rendering out preview shots that are lower resolution, you can still do all your compositing. Make sure this is set to relative, and if you have to upscale it and re-render everything, all your blurs and glows will look will look exactly the same as your final result, and it's resolution independent. So that's really nice. But for this, I'm just gonna blur this about 10% in the y-axis, and now what we can do is if we bring in a color mix, I can add this back on top to my original image. So I'm going to switch these two around. And as you can see, you can create some really, really interesting effects. Now, if you bring down the factor, more of the highlights will be added in. You can see you can add some really interesting glows and blurs to your image like this. So the blur tool is very multifunctional. If you want to change this around, you can set this one to X, and then you have these really streaky glows that you can add into your image as well. I'm going to turn this one off too. Same with the add. And the last one I sort of want to talk about a little bit is the a very popular effect when it comes to motion graphics is creating a vignette. So this is done quite easily by using the ellipse mask over here on the mat. And if I connect this up to my viewer, you'll see that all this is just, it's used usually to create a mask for other effects, but you can use this as color just as much, as a color output just as much rather. So all we have here, it's a white circle. And again, this is resolution independent, so you can use this on a smaller preview and then render out the larger preview in the end. So I set this one to, actually I'm going to set the coordinates to 0.5 and 0.5, so it's still in the middle. I'm going to leave it at the default. I'm going to set the width to about 0.9, so a width of 1 or a height of 1 corresponds to the size of your image. So if I were to set this to 1 and just move my image a little bit, you'll see that it spans from one edge to the image to the other edge to the image, and we've set up the width at 1 here. And we can set the height to 1 as well. And because this is sort of a crushed image, it's crushed down, it's a sort of a weird, how should I call this? Weird resolution. You'll have to make sure that it looks correct once you're doing your final composite. So I'll bring this back into the viewer. Now what I'm going to do is put in another color mix, set this to multiply, and I'm going to put the ellipse mask into the second slot. So looking at this, we can actually see we have a some darkening around the edges. And the second thing we have to do, actually I'm going to duplicate this blur over here, and we can set it to like 25% and 25%. And what will happen if I turn this on, because obviously it's still muted because I copied it from the previous blur, you'll see the vignette appearing, and I'm just going to take the nodes out, and I'm going to mute this node and unmute this node, and you'll see that's exactly what it does. So these are some very basic effects which are used a lot in motion graphics and which you can use to sort of add to your scene a little bit. If I turn on the glare again, I think for the most part this is what the final image almost looked like. So all I did was just add a little bit of glare and add a vignette to the end result. Of course, you can go a lot further and you can do a whole bunch of stuff, but for basic compositing tricks go, this is a really nice way just to add a little bit extra